Hi everyone. So today I'm going to show you how to do no knead white bread. I'm going to do a plain one today, but I usually add herbs and spices and even cheese. And then I'm also going to make huckleberry jam. So first I add 3 cups of flour. I use all-purpose flour to a large bowl. And then I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons of yeast. You can use instant yeast. I'm using regular yeast here. It just changes the amount of time it takes for this to rise. And then you're gonna add a little salt. I didn't have any ground down, so here's some large grain pink salt that I'm adding to my mortar and pestle. And then I'm just gonna grind that down until it's pretty smooth, and then add 1.5 teaspoons to the bowl. And then once that's in there, I just whisk it all together because I want the dry ingredients to be really uniform or as best as possible before I add 1.5 cups of warm water. And usually what that means is like 110 degrees. So if you put your finger in there, it should be a little bit warmer than your natural temperature. And then I mix all of that up until I get kind of a really shaggy dough. And I'll show you in a second here what I mean by that. It doesn't have to be perfect or beautiful or look like a loaf of bread yet. It just kind of looks like that. And then I cover that and I set it aside to rise. It's going to rise for about 2 hours. And then while that's happening, here are some blueberries and strawberries and then huckleberries that I actually foraged at a lake this last weekend that I was really excited about. So I have about 2.5 cups of berries and I add them to my saucepan and then mash it all up. You can leave some fruit whole still. And it'll just kind of change the texture of your jam in the end. But I mashed it up pretty good and left just a couple of whole berries in there because I think they taste delicious. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so huckleberries grow wild here, and I went out to the lake with some friends for the holiday weekend and happened upon these, so I filled my water bottle as full as I could. And then I'm going to add a cup of sugar here. You can add up to 1.25 cups. Yeah, I think that's what I did. But you can also only use a cup if you like it a little more tart or want less sugar. And then a tablespoon of lemon juice. I did a cap full of vanilla. I know people hate that measurement, but like half a teaspoon is totally fine. And I whisked that all up. Got that uniform as well, and then I placed it over heat. You're going to want to bring it to a boil, and then once it boils, you bring it down to a simmer, and you cook that down for about 20 minutes, and then do a wrinkle test on it. You'll also notice I sanitized my jars at the same time. Boiling them sanitizes them, and it also brings them up to temperature. So when your jam is ready and you pour it into the jars, if the jars were cool and the jam was really hot, you might shatter your jars. So this gets them to temperature and it sterilizes them, because this was the first time I was going to water bath can, which I'll talk about a little bit here. So then I added the jam. The wrinkle test, I put some plates in the freezer and let them cool down. And then when I thought my jam was almost ready, I'd drop a little bit on one of those plates and I'd push it with my finger. And if it wrinkled and stayed that way, then it was ready. If it's not ready, then you just keep it on heat, stir continuously, and try again in a few minutes. It actually ended up taking me probably like 45 minutes. My jam was pretty runny, so took a little while. So then you fill these jars and leave about 1/4 inch at the top, and wipe those rims down. And then I added the lids. You want them snug, but they don't have to be so snug that you'll never be able to get the lid off. And then I drop those back in the pot to boil you bring it back up to a boil, and then you let them boil for about 10 minutes, and that's going to actually pressure can the jars, or water bath can the jars. So as that was happening, my 2-hour rise time was over, so I got ready to shape my dough for my bread. I put the pot, so I bake it in a ceramic pot, and I put that in the oven, and then started the oven at 400 degrees. So the oven's going to preheat with the pot in there. And it's important to have that pot hot when you put the bread dough in there to bake. And then I put some flour on some parchment paper and added the shaggy dough. My dough is a little bit wet today, so I added some extra flour, and then I just started shaping. You don't have to be super fancy about shaping it. I just kind of get it to where it's a little bit more of a smooth dough, as you're seeing it right here. And then I kind of shape it into a sphere. You can bake it with that extra flour on the parchment paper, but I don't really like the taste of it after, so I usually dump that out, and then I put my dough loaf right back on, and then that's going to rise for 30 minutes while your pot is in the oven preheating. So 30 minutes have gone by. This dough is now 2 or 3 times the size. I'm going to do a little bit of shaping here, but not much. You can do a little more shaping, but I didn't really want to fuss around too much with it, and it's going to turn out great anyway, I promise. And then I'm going to score it. Now, don't judge me. I don't have a bread lame. I asked for one for my birthday, which is in less than a month. But I'm going to use my very dull knife and just do a little cross in my bread. But hopefully someday I'll have a super sharp bread lame, and I'll be able to score it really pretty and do little leaves and blah, blah, blah. But that's in the future. So here's my hot ceramic pot, and I'm going to place the dough on the parchment paper in this pot. And you're going to do 2 bakings. So the first one, you're going to do it covered. If you have an oven-safe lid, that's great. If you have a Dutch oven with an oven-safe lid, perfect. Cast iron Dutch ovens are great for this. But either way, you cover that up, and then you stick it back in the oven. You do the first bake for 30 minutes, and then you'll take that cover off and let it bake again for 15 minutes, and then it's going to get this nice brown on the outside. So that's my loaf of bread. Here's my canned huckleberry jam, which I struggled with a little bit, which means the seal was good, which is great. First time water bath canning worked great. And then I toasted a piece of the bread because obviously we have to taste test, right? Put a little butter on there, and then added some of the huckleberry jam. And you'll see the final product here. It was absolutely delicious, all homemade, except the butter. Sometimes I make homemade butter, but not every time. But there it is. Look how pretty. Oh my gosh. So good.